After my husband's funeral, my son drove me to a deserted road and said, "This is where you get out. The house and business are mine now." I stood in the dust, clutching my bag, while he drove away without looking back. No phone, no money, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. I was free, but he had no idea what I'd done before his father died. My name is Eleanor Thompson, formerly Eleanor Miller. Then I was Richard's wife, then Michael and Sarah's mother. And now, I'm just a woman betrayed by her own children. I'm not complaining. I'm telling this story so that maybe someone listening will recognize themselves or stop in time. I'm 68 years old. My hands can no longer firmly hold a bowl of dough, but they remember how to knead bread, that sourdough bread my son Michael adored since childhood. And they remember Sarah's hair, fine as cobwebs. I would braid it before school while she sat on a stool, swinging her legs. I'm telling all this for nostalgia's sake, just so you understand. Until recently, I was an ordinary mother who believed she had raised good children, hardworking, grateful, mine. Then Richard got sick. Pancreatic cancer, a quiet, insidious disease. In 14 months, it took him from me, slowly but irreversibly. We decided not to tell anyone at first. Not the children, not our friends, just between us. Not because we were ashamed, we just didn't want to burden them. Let them live in peace, we said. They'll have time enough to worry, to cry, to mourn. Now is not the time. Michael was in New York, consumed by his urgent meetings. He hadn't spent a single holiday with us in years. No Thanksgiving, no Christmas. There was always some business trip. And Sarah moved every year. A yoga center in Colorado, a detox retreat in California. All her ventures somehow always ended after Richard transferred money. "Let's not tell them yet," he said one day, lying in bed when he could no longer get up by himself. His voice was hollow, heavy, as if coming through cotton. "Let them live without this shadow for a while." I nodded then, because I loved him, because it was his last wish. What else could I do for him? When the children finally came, at the very end, they didn't bring warmth, they brought cold questions. Richard and I lived in our old house in Oak Ridge, that same small town where we turned 20 abandoned acres into Thompson orchards, without loans, without helpers, just the two of us, from nothing. An organic farm, an apple orchard, supplies to schools, donation boxes to nursing homes. It wasn't a business, it was our life's work. Michael sat at our old kitchen table, in the same place where he ate soup as a child, and said, "Mom, I'm just trying to be practical. You know the medical expenses were substantial. The house is old, the orchard is too much for you alone. You won't manage. We need to look to the future." He spoke calmly, confidently. That's how people talk in negotiations where everything is calculated. Except he wouldn't look me in the eyes, and I looked and didn't see my son. I saw a man who found it convenient to think his mother was a burden. Sarah arrived later, bringing perfumes, suitcases, and tears. Sincere ones, I thought. I saw her hug her father, sit by his bedside at night. I thought then that maybe I was wrong. Maybe she really was present. But then came the funeral, small and modest, as he wanted. A plot on the hill overlooking our orchard. Spring was just beginning, buds swelling with sap. I stood between my children. Michael, straight-backed, cold. Sarah crying into a white handkerchief I'd never seen before. When everyone left, I said, "Tomorrow, let's go through some of Dad's things. We'll need to sort things out." But Michael was already pouring himself whiskey, and saying, "Sarah and I have talked. We need to resolve everything quickly. We have jobs, you have age, and the orchard has problems." "Problems?" I asked. "The business is outdated. Dad said it needed a new approach, modern. We've already found a buyer. They're offering good money for the land. Dad said so. I have it all written down." And he put a paper on the table. Not a lawyer, not a notary. An ordinary sheet with the corporate logo of Michael's firm. Richard's signature too neat, too uniform for a man who hadn't been able to hold a spoon for a month. You had him sign this while he was on morphine, I said. And then I understood they didn't just want my home, they'd already taken it, I just didn't know it yet. I didn't scream, didn't make a scene. It was enough that, sitting at the same table where Richard and I used to make apple pies, my children were discussing my life as a matter of paperwork, like a transaction. Show me, I said quietly. The will. Michael pushed the paper toward me. I looked at it, not a notary form, not our family lawyer Jack Wilson's signature. Just a copy printed on a regular sheet with the letterhead of his New York firm. Richard's signature. I knew it by heart. He put it on every Apple contract, on checks for workers, on notes in the bread box. But here it was too uniform, as if a stranger's hand had forged it with a ruler. This is fake, I said. Richard couldn't sign like this. His hands shook from pain even when drinking water. He was of sound mind, Michael replied. He understood everything. He just didn't tell you so as not to upset you. He wanted us to continue the business, but properly, with money, with investors. How much longer can you keep doing everything by hand, the old-fashioned way? Sarah was sitting, silent, scrolling through her phone. There's a buyer, she finally said. A developer. They want to build a country club complex. $7 million, Mom. It's a chance to start a new life for all of us. I looked at them and couldn't understand. Were these the same children I read bedtime stories to? Drove to soccer practice, froze at school recitals in the gymnasium. Are you saying I can't manage? I asked. Mom, just look at yourself. With this phrase, Sarah covered everything. You're almost 70, the house is cold, your joints hurt, the appliances are old, you deserve to rest. In the retirement community, everything is at hand. Nurses, activities, scheduled meals. I have all the brochures. This is my home, this is our home. Legally, it was in Dad's name, Michael corrected, and he left it to us. We're not kicking you out, we want to make sure you're taken care of, but we'll handle the orchard. I got up from the table, not hunched, not like an old woman, just straight, calm, like someone whose insides had finally broken completely. I'm tired, we'll talk tomorrow. They nodded, as if in agreement. But I knew they had no tomorrow in their plans. I went upstairs to the bedroom, where Richard and I had lived for 40 years, where there had been arguments and laughter, nights with fevers, silence, and embraces. I lay down on our old spring mattress, closed my eyes, but didn't sleep. I heard them whispering in the kitchen, heard Michael calling someone, Sarah sending voice messages. They didn't know that in an old house, you can hear every word if you know where to put the pillow. I realized I only had the morning, just one chance. At dawn, I got up, washed, dressed, went downstairs to the kitchen. They were already waiting. Dressed, prepared. On the table stood a thermos. Next to it, a small suitcase. Not mine. We've packed everything, Sarah said, as if talking about a trip. Essentials. We're going to show you a place, a retirement community. Golden Acres. 2 hours from here. It's very beautiful. I'm not going anywhere, I said, pouring myself coffee. I'm staying home. Mom, Michael's voice grew firmer. The decision has been made. The deal with the developer is next week. We need to settle everything in advance. Be reasonable. I set the cup down slowly so as not to spill it. You haven't settled anything. You've lost. Mom, don't make a scene. Michael was already checking his watch. Just get in the car. I looked at him, not at his face, but deeper. And I understood that before me was not my son, but a man to whom his mother was an asset, an object. She could be removed, relocated, settled. I nodded. I need to use the bathroom. I'll get my pills and a few photos. Of course, Sarah nodded, even with a smile. Take whatever you want. We'll send the rest later. I went upstairs, but not for pills, for what they didn't know about. In the hiding place behind the mirror, passport, birth certificate, Richard's emergency cash. And in the closet behind his flannel shirts, a fireproof box. With it I came down slowly, composed. When I stepped onto the porch, they were already waiting in the car. Large, black, with leather seats, rented, obviously, for serious business. I sat in silence, without questions. They were satisfied. We drove for a long time. Fields, towns, a river passed by the window. And then the car turned onto a country road. Gravel crunched under the wheels. And after a few minutes, a stop. An open space, an empty field, and silence. "This is where you get out," said Michael. Calmly, casually, without even looking. I turned. Sarah was looking out the window. Silent. "There's a gas station about 5 miles that way. Call someone or get a taxi." He opened the door. "You're throwing me out like a dog." "Don't be dramatic, Mom. Everything will be fine. This is just easier." I got out. Stood there, suitcase in hand. Spring, damp grass, wind from the heart that was beating not from fear, but from relief. They left. The car dissolved around the bend, and I remained. And suddenly I understood. I wasn't alone. I was free. I stood in the middle of the field, with a travel bag in one hand, and a heavy purse on my shoulder. No panic. Just a strange clarity. They hadn't betrayed me suddenly. It wasn't a flash. No, it was a slowly growing crack that I had refused to see for years. I looked around. Empty field. Not a soul. Not a car. Not a phone. They thought I was completely helpless. But Richard had insisted about 10 years ago. There must be an emergency stash. For worst-case scenarios. Phone. Documents. Some cash. And no one should know about it. I walked 5 miles down the country road without stopping. My legs ached, the bag cut into my shoulder, blisters on my feet, but I walked, and with each step, I let go. I remembered how Richard and I in our 30s brought seedlings here in a wheelbarrow, how we stood waist-deep in grass, cutting dry branches, digging the soil with our hands. Back then, there was neither equipment nor money, just faith that we would have something of our own, that on this land would grow not just apples, but something real. And I understood that I was walking. No, I was moving forward. I reached the gas station by evening. I was so tired I couldn't feel my feet. On the porch sat a familiar man. Bob Jenkins, the gas station owner. A man in his 60s with an eternally wrinkled apron. "Mrs. Thompson," he squinted. "Is that you? Strange day." He looked at the suitcase, then at my shoes, then back at my face. "Come in. I'll make you some coffee. And you need a phone, I suppose?" Urgently. He led me inside. A small nook smelling of gasoline and pastries. He put on the kettle, gave me the landline. I immediately dialed Jack Wilson's number, our family lawyer. He knew Richard and me since the time we only had the plot of land. "Eleanor." Surprise and concern in his voice. "Thank God you're in touch. I've been looking for you. Why didn't you come to the reading of the will?" "What will?" I asked. Silence on the other end. Then he said, "Your son presented a document, but I had my doubts. The signature was strange. I tried to call, but the phone was turned off." "I was unavailable," I said, barely containing my irritation. "Jack, I need your help, and your discretion. Everything I say stays between us." "Of course. Can you come by?" "I'll be there in an hour." I returned the receiver, thanked Bob. He offered to drive me, but I declined. I didn't want to talk to anyone. He gave me a bottle of water, a couple of muffins, and an old warm jacket. "It'll get cold at night. Take it, don't be shy." My heart ached. Here was a man I'd spoken to maybe 3 times in my life, and that only at the farmer's market. And now he was giving me more warmth than my own children had in the past year. I left and headed toward downtown Oak Ridge. In Jack's office, it was warm and quiet. His secretary, seeing me, exclaimed, "Oh, Mrs. Thompson, we've been worried. Please go in, Mr. Wilson is expecting you." He met me at the door. He had aged, but his eyes were still the same. Attentive, alive. "Sit down. Tell me everything." I told him everything. From Richard's diagnosis and our silence, to the trip to the field. As I spoke, he didn't interrupt, just squeezed a pen and kept looking me straight in the eyes. When I finished, I took out of my bag the metal box, the one my children didn't know about. Here are the documents for 20 acres, purchased long before the marriage in my maiden name, Richard said then. Let it be a reserve. He opened the folder, studied the papers, nodded deeply. This is your strength. This is your land. And without it, no developer can carry out the project. He looked at me. What do you want to do? I paused, then answered calmly. I want to get the house back, get the orchard back, and let them learn what it means to forget who raised you. He said nothing, just got up, went to the safe, and put the folder there. You don't just have the land, Eleanor. You have the truth. And that, believe me, is stronger than any signature. I nodded. Then let's begin, because we don't have much time. By morning, everything was ready. Jack Wilson filed a court petition to suspend the land sale, an urgent measure until the authenticity of the will was clarified. A temporary block was placed on the accounts of the company, which Michael and Sarah had already started to clean out. The bank cooperated, having known Richard for decades. Meanwhile, I moved into a small room above the bakery. Martha, an old friend, the owner of this bakery, received me without unnecessary words. She simply gave me the key. Stay as long as you need. Bread, tea, warmth, you'll have everything. But your children, don't let them come to my cafe. I won't serve them. I didn't laugh. I simply said, don't worry, they won't come here. It smells of conscience. The next day, the real work began. I took out a notebook in which Richard and I had kept records for over 30 years. Everything from fertilizer deliveries, to the list of workers, to whom we gave bonuses not on paper but humanely. I called everyone I knew, the agronomist, the old accountant, neighbors, the lawyer who helped with the environmental permits for the plot, the journalist from the local newspaper, with whom we baked an apple pie for the harvest festival. Everyone listened. Everyone was on my side. Eleanor, said Susan, that same journalist, tell me, do you need revenge or justice? I need Richard's name not to be sold along with the land. He doesn't deserve that. Then all right. I know how. You just don't be afraid. By noon, everything was in motion. Land documents in court. Block on the transaction with the developer. The newspaper had already typeset an article with the headline, Local Orchard in Danger. Children want to sell. Mother resists. It wasn't a scandal. It was resistance by all the rules. In the evening I sat by the window in the room above the bakery. It smelled of vanilla and yeast. Martha put a cup of tea and a plate with a pastry in front of me. You're strong, Eleanor. You know, I'm just doing what I must. They won't understand. Neither him nor her. It's not my concern anymore. The phone rang around 9 hours in the evening. New cheap, bought at the gas station. Only 2 people knew the number. Jack and the bank. On the screen. Unknown. I answered. Hello, Mom? Michael's voice. Cold, restrained, but no longer so confident. What have you done? I'm simply defending what belongs to me, I said calmly. What your father and I created over 40 years. You went to court, blocked the accounts, talked to the newspaper. Do you understand how you've compromised us? I haven't compromised you. I'm saving myself. You made your choice when you took me to that field. Silence. Then briefly, do you want a scandal? I'll propose one option, I said. Just one. You and Sarah officially renounce all rights to the house and business. In exchange, I don't file a complaint with the prosecutor. You each get $5 million. Once. After that, our relationship is over. Silence. Just breathing. Are you serious? Absolutely. You have 24 hours, then everything goes the legal route. And I hung up. Do you think they'll sign? Asked Jack, looking out the window. I hope not, I replied. Why? Because if they sign, they won't understand anything. And if they lose everything, maybe then they'll realize what they've lost. I didn't say it with bitterness. I had no bitterness left. just calm and a goal. 24 hours passed. I knew if they didn't call, it meant they'd chosen war, and if they called, it would be too late. They called exactly at 2:00 p.m. sharp. On the screen, unknown, but I knew who it was. "I'm listening," I answered calmly. "Mom." Michael's voice was no longer professional, tired, broken. "We're not going to sign under those conditions. We don't agree to lose everything." "Then you lose everything by court," I replied, "and with a criminal charge, you choose." Silence. I imagined him sitting now in some car or hotel room with a sweaty phone in his hand, and a dead expression on his face. "Mom, be reasonable. We're your children. Are you really willing to cut everything off? And you, when you took me to that field, were you reasonable?" And suddenly on the other end came another voice. "Sarah." "Mom, please, I didn't want to." "It was all Michael. He said it was easier, that you wouldn't manage anyway." "And you just silently agreed?" I asked. "Because it was convenient for you. I have debts. I thought if we sold quickly, I could pay them all off. Start over." Her voice broke. "I didn't think you'd go as far as court." "That's your mistake. That all this time you thought I wouldn't go all the way. But you won't file a complaint with the police, will you?" Sarah was almost crying. "You both participated in forging the will, drove me to an empty field, hoped I would disappear. That's a crime. And if you don't sign the documents, I'll submit them personally and be at peace." Another pause on the other end. "What do you want?" Michael's voice was almost strangled. "Signed renunciation of the business, house, land, and confirmation that the will is fake. In exchange, I don't file a complaint with the prosecutor. And there's no money anymore. Yesterday there was. Today you simply leave with empty hands." "That's not fair." "It is fair," I said quietly. "You didn't ask if it was fair to abandon a mother on the roadside." I hung up. Beside me sat Jack, watching me intently. "They'll sign," he said. "They have no other way out." "Yes, but I don't care anymore." I didn't care not about the documents, but about the relationship. Even if they signed, we no longer had anything in common. An hour later, in the editorial office of the local newspaper, the first article came out. How a mother saved the orchard from her children. Thompson Orchards in the crosshairs of developers. A photo of me, standing in rubber boots in front of the orchard. Serious, with a straight back. Next to it, a brief interview. Everything clear. The land belongs to the mother. Transaction stopped. Lawyer confirms forgery of the will. The next morning in Oak Ridge, the talk began. Neighbors called, came with cakes. Some simply hugged. No one judged, because everyone understood. "They're not from here. They don't understand that land isn't just a plot," said Martha when we had tea in the evening. "It's memory, it's roots, it's Richard, it's you." "They were my roots once," I said. "They were, Eleanor, but they rotted." 2 days later, Jack called. "They agree. They'll come to the office tomorrow." With the signed papers, I felt neither joy nor relief, just fatigue, as if I had reached the summit and now could simply stand, silently, without ovations. The next morning, they came. Michael, haggard, unshaven, in a wrinkled shirt. Sarah, with smeared mascara, hair hastily pulled back. They sat opposite, I across from them. Beside me, Jack and our new lawyer. Everything strict, official. "Here's the renunciation of all rights," said Jack. "Sign." Michael grabbed the pen, signed quickly. Didn't even reread. Sarah signed slowly. Tears fell on the paper. I looked at them without anger, simply as someone from whom too much had been taken for feelings to remain. "Now you leave Oak Ridge," I said, "and never return here. If I see either of you here again, I'll file a complaint not as a mother, but as a citizen." They got up, didn't say goodbye, didn't thank, went out and left. I remained seated. The silence was such that you could hear the clock on the wall ticking the seconds. I looked at Jack. "It's done." He nodded. "It's done, you won." I didn't smile, simply said, "No, I simply came home." I really did come home. The house welcomed me, as if it had been waiting for me all this time. The same shutters, creaking floorboards, the smell of baked bread ingrained in the wood. Only now the silence was different. Not that deaf, oppressive silence that was after Richard's funeral. No, this was a silence of liberation. I walked through the rooms. Some dusty, in others things scattered. Some traces of Michael remained. His laptop on the table. A pair of dirty boots by the door. I didn't touch them, simply looked at them as something foreign, then went upstairs. In the bedroom, almost everything was as Richard and I had left it. Only the closet was ransacked, drawers pulled out, clothes piled up. They were looking for something, documents maybe, or money, or remnants of my naivety. I approached the bed silently, sat down, closed my eyes. Only 4 days had passed since they took me to the field, but it felt as if I had lived a small life. I didn't cry. The tears had run out earlier, when I stood alone in the field, with a strange suitcase and a bag on my shoulder. Now there was only calm, not joy, not satisfaction, just clarity. The next morning, I collected Michael and Sarah's things. Not with anger, simply carefully, humanely. I put them in boxes, left them on the porch, called the courier service to pick them up. They had nothing more to do here. After lunch, Jack came by, brought papers from the court. Now everything is official. The business and house are in your name only. Eleanor, he said, handing me the documents. You did the right thing, and Richard would be proud. He knew in life what I'm capable of, I said. Only then I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Jack was silent, then took out of his briefcase the recent edition of the newspaper. On the front page, the headline, "The Orchard That Stood Firm." Eleanor Thompson's story. The woman who didn't sell her native land. Under the photo, me standing in rubber boots in front of the orchard, calm, authentic, without a mask. I looked and nodded. Let it be, let them read. In the evening Martha came, brought bread, fresh rolls, and a pot of stew. For your first return home, she said. We sat on the porch, tea in cups with saucers, a blanket over our knees. And how are you, she asked. Quiet, I replied. That's good. That's authentic. And the children? Nothing. No call, no apologies, no attempts to explain. And there's no need, said Martha. They left. You stayed. This is your house, your land, your life. Yes, only now without illusions. I started taking care of the orchard again, though not with my own hands. I hired helpers, found a manager. Everything calm, precise, unhurried, unforced, doing what was necessary, with the feeling that now each apple, each leaf, each board of the house is protected. And most importantly, I no longer look out the window, waiting for some visit, because I know that everything I need is already here. In me. 2 months passed. The orchard bloomed exuberantly, as if it knew that now everything would be different. The new team was handling things excellently. I hardly intervened. Only in the mornings did I walk among the trees, a habit that Richard and I didn't abandon even in the most difficult years. I walked between the rows, touched the leaves, observed the soil. Everything lived. Everything grew. The house became cleaner, freer. I removed the heavy curtains, washed the windows, reorganized the furniture in the living room. Not because I wanted to start a new life, simply because life itself began to change when those who brought nothing but anxiety left. One evening I was sitting on the porch, in Richard's favorite armchair. In my lap, a notebook, with new notes, plans for spring, new varieties, renovated irrigation system. Setting up a small store by fall with our products, cheese, juices, jams, creating an educational program at the orchard for school children, and, most importantly, establishing a scholarship in Richard Thompson's name, for those who want to study agriculture. I remembered how he always said, the land needs to do more than just yield crops. Someone needs to want to continue afterward. Now there will be. The phone beeped. New message. Number unknown. but I immediately knew whose it was. Mom, I'm not making excuses. I just want to talk without pretensions. Just sit with you, if you're ever ready. Sarah. I looked at the screen and strangely, didn't get angry, didn't take offense, didn't tremble, simply felt nothing. Zero. I simply put the phone aside, didn't respond, didn't delete it, let it stay. Let her know I read it. Nothing has been heard from Michael. Jack said they had opened an investigation against him for document forgery. He was fired. He disappeared. And strangely, I don't even feel sorry for him, not because I've hardened. No, simply when you're betrayed, you stop spending warmth on those who don't cherish it. One day, as I was walking through town, a boy of about 16 approached me. Mrs. Thompson? He asked uncertainly. Yes. I nodded. I study at the technical college. Agronomy. I heard you've created a scholarship. Can I apply? Of course. Only you'll have to study for real. The land doesn't love the superficial. He nodded with such fervor that I suddenly felt that everything I had done was not in vain. Yes, the family was destroyed, but something stronger remained. The work, the meaning, the memory. That same night, I again sat in the armchair on the porch. Stars above my head, warm, quiet, crickets chirping in the distance. A cup of tea in my lap. I looked at the orchard. It was dark, but alive, like a breath. And suddenly I understood. This is the real family, not the one by blood, but the one that remains. The house, the trees, the people with whom you can drink tea in silence and not fear that they will betray you. The world no longer seemed dangerous, it simply became honest, and I was finally in my place. Fall came early this year. There's already frost on the glass in the morning. The air transparent like water in a well. The orchard turned golden, heavy, slow. I wake up early. The house is quiet. Just the creaking of the floorboards and the smell of coffee. There's order in the house, silence in the head. Not the kind that frightens, but the kind that comes after the storm. I no longer wait for calls, don't listen for footsteps. Don't check if a letter has come from them. Nothing more will come from there. And it doesn't hurt. It has simply become part of the background, like a scar that doesn't ache, but reminds you of what you've been through. The Richard Thompson Scholarship works. The first 2 students have already received their documents. One of them, that same boy I met at the store. His mother came to me, with a pie, with tears. We won't forget. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I took the pie, thanked her, and smiled. Not out of politeness. For real. The store also opened. A small building next to the orchard, with jars of jam, apple juice, dried herbs. Sometimes tourists come in, school children. Often just locals. Do you really manage all this alone? They ask. I don't just have a pair of hands. I have roots. They don't appear. Michael seems to have dissolved. There are rumors that he lives somewhere in the south. Works for someone, not in his specialty. Sarah, at first, still tried to write a couple more messages, and then stopped. Apparently understood, the doors are closed, not out of spite, out of clarity. One day, a journalist from the county newspaper approached me, wanted to do an interview. Your story has become a symbol. The woman who didn't give up what was hers, the mother who stood firm. I refused. I'm not a symbol. I simply stayed on my land. Everything else is fiction. He nodded respectfully and left. And tonight, again I'm sitting on the porch, in that same armchair, where Richard used to sit, on long summer evenings. The tea is cooling. In my lap, a notebook with new notes, plans for spring, new varieties, renovated irrigation system. I don't fear the future, because now it's mine. The house is mine, the orchard is mine, the words I speak are mine, the silence too. Perhaps you've listened to this story, expecting the moment when I would cry, regret, open the doors to them, like in the movies. But you know what? Sometimes children leave not because they weren't loved enough, but because they chose to be strangers, Sometimes betrayal doesn't heal, isn't discussed, isn't explained, it simply happens. And if you're lucky, you stand up and continue on alone. I'm not bitter. I'm healed. I'm no longer the one who can be bent, led away, made to sign something behind her back. I'm a woman who didn't give up what was hers. It's not a victory, it's a return.